Hey, what's up guys? Welcome back to the channel. So in the last video we talked about the roles that genetics and diet play in the obesity epidemic. Now today's video is going to be sort of a part 2 for that last one, and if you haven't watched that video you can find that in the description below. Today's video is going to be about how processed foods and new technology in the food industry have contributed to the obesity epidemic. Let's get right into it. Basically, the entire obesity epidemic can be attributed to the amount of calories people eat every day. In 2000, it was found that on average, the US produces over 3,900 calories of food per person every day. This is a lot of calories, especially since most people in the US aren't super active all the time. The daily recommendation of calories per day is around half of that. The thing though is that people didn't always used to eat this many calories. This number only began to increase to this large number starting in the 1970s. So we're going to have to take it back to the start and see what happened. At the start of the 1900s, most people were regularly doing hard manual labor every day to make money and buy food for themselves. And as a result, they ate a lot of calories so that they had enough energy to do all that work. During this time, they were eating around 3,500 calories per person per day, and this was fine. However, between 1900 and the 1950s, the US became more advanced and manual labor became less common. As a result, the number of calories people ate went down. They needed less energy. So now, every person was eating around 3,000 calories every day, which was also fine. But then the 1970s rolled around, and all of a sudden, even though people were doing less work than ever before, the amount of calories consumed per person per day began to increase all the way until 2010 when it reached 4,000 calories per person per day. So after the 1970s, many people began to eat way more than they needed to, and as a result, the obesity epidemic took off and still continues to this day. The big question here is, why did people start eating so much all of a sudden? Basically, it was because of a huge revolution in the food industry during the 1970s. Previously, most food was cooked and prepared at home, and families would just make however much they needed and ate just that amount. Also, there was no way to store food for long periods of time because fresh food was the most readily available at the time. However, in the 1970s, technological advancements in food preservation and packaging allowed food producers to prepare, package, deliver, and sell processed foods in huge quantities. They now had new artificial flavors, preservatives, freezing techniques, vacuum packaging, which changed the food industry drastically. They were now able to produce new, ready-to-eat foods in huge quantities and have them available at practically every store at all times. And on top of this, the foods they were mass-producing were also cheap, so they were very convenient for the average person to buy. This completely changed the way people ate food at the time. People were no longer limited by perishable food and their own ability to make the food themselves. Now they could just walk into town and buy all these new tasty foods for cheap whenever they wanted. And unsurprisingly, this new convenience led to people eating a lot more than they used to. A great example of this is the Twinkie. I'm sure all of you know what Twinkies are, but if you don't, basically Twinkies are little cakes with cream filling inside that are sold pretty much everywhere and are also very unhealthy for you. Before the food revolution of the 1970s, someone wanted to eat a cake with cream filling inside, it would take a ton of work and knowledge to get all the ingredients together and actually make it. And because of this limitation, people would rarely eat cakes at all. However, after the 1970s, Twinkies made eating cakes super easy, and now people were doing it all the time. And since people are eating junk foods like this all the time now, the number of calories eaten per person per day is increasing quickly. The same thing even happened with French fries. Prior to the 1970s, French fries were rarely eaten, but after they became much easier to mass produce and were cheaper to buy, people began eating them all the time. Even today, potatoes are the most eaten vegetable in the US because of French fries and another winner from the 1970s tech advancement, potato chips. Overall, the technological advancements of the 1970s opened a huge door for the processed food industry to thrive. I mean, just around 50 years later in 2020, the packaged food sector is now a multi-trillion-dollar industry. Previously, people's diets for the most part were restricted by perishable, fresh foods, as well as their own ability and willingness to prepare food. However, after these advancements, junk food was being mass-produced and sold everywhere for cheap, so now people are no longer restricted in their diets. And over time, these processed junk foods became more and more popular, and daily calorie intake also increased, which in the end made so many more people overweight, and now we have the obesity epidemic on our hands with no end in sight. Anyways, that's all for today. We're going to be doing a whole series on the obesity epidemic and the many causes and problems, so make sure to subscribe to keep up with the next videos in the series coming out soon. And while you're at it, like the video, leave a comment down below with any questions or thoughts you might have, and I'll see you in the next one. Thanks.